She called me the driver in front of the head of her board. Not once. Not by accident. She said it clearly, smiling like it was some charming inside joke between social classes. Oh, that's just my driver. He's harmless. Then she laughed like a swan, head tilted, fake gracious, and walked off with her overpriced shoes clicking down the marble hallway of the Grand Willard Ballroom. I was holding her clutch bag. She didn't even notice. I didn't correct her. I just stood there, invisible, the way she trained me to be over the last 3 years, one dismissive nod at a time. She didn't marry me for my past. She married me for my silence. And tonight, that silence would do exactly what her ambition never could, make people listen. She hadn't noticed the banner above the ballroom doors. Innovation through integrity. It was her big night, her charity's annual gala, black tie, DC elites. The sort of donors who wouldn't put a penny into a homeless fund unless it also came with a commemorative plaque and 3 mentions in the post. And the keynote speaker? Oh, she adored him. He's a beast, she gushed weeks earlier, flipping through Forbes like it was a cookbook. Built his company from scratch. No fluff. All hustle. I'd kill to get him on the board. I just nodded and stirred my tea. Now, I sat near the coat check, just out of the way enough to be ignored, just visible enough to be mocked if needed. She knew exactly how to position me. The valet tag still rested in my pocket. My suit, tailored but worn, didn't scream wealth. It whispered it, if you knew where to listen. 3 tables down, 2 women whispered over a tablet. One pointed discreetly, her eyes darting in my direction. That's him, she mouthed. The other looked up, blinked twice, and covered her mouth. They recognized me. She didn't. She was busy introducing herself to a hedge fund director, laughing too hard at something dull, brushing imaginary lint from his sleeve like she belonged there. She always thought proximity to power was the same as possessing it. By the way, if you're still reading this, and somehow not subscribed yet, I'm going to need you to hit that button. You have no idea how much that motivates our little team to keep pushing these stories out daily. Seriously, 90% of people just listen and bounce. Don't be like them. You're already this deep. Commit. We commit to you. Back to her. She was good at putting on faces. She'd practiced that effortless elegance in the mirror before every board dinner. Learned how to talk without actually saying anything. Memorized little anecdotes about famous people she'd never met. Rehearsed every laugh. But her greatest role? Casting me as something forgettable. Background. Harmless. I watched as she air-kissed a tech investor and casually dropped that she spent time in Aspen with the keynote last year. Total lie. We were in Aspen. She got altitude sickness and spent 3 days vomiting into hotel towels. The only thing she shared with that man was the same elevator once, and she didn't even recognize him. But that didn't stop her from bragging like she knew his coffee order. Meanwhile, behind the stage curtain, a production assistant whispered to another, holding a crumpled photo someone had just texted them. Is that really him? She asked. Couldn't be, the other whispered back. He hasn't been seen in public in a decade. I saw the speaker's initials engraved on the gala program. I'd seen them before. I engraved them myself, a long time ago, on the first investor memo he ever sent to a VC firm. I printed it, stapled it, and mailed it by hand while he was still coding out of a WeWork bathroom. That was before the world called him a genius. Before the press gave him a dozen nicknames. Before he learned how to tie a tie without looking like a frat boy on trial. Before he was someone. He knew who made him. But my wife? She was too busy laughing at a story she didn't understand and sipping a wine she couldn't pronounce correctly. She didn't know it yet, but the story of her life had just reached the final chapter. And the man sitting near the coat check, her driver, was holding the pen. She floated from conversation to conversation like a debutante in Versailles, only less sincere. Every table was another chance to inflate herself just a little more, to perform her curated identity. The socialite. This self-made philanthropist. The woman who built her network from charm, wit, and an allegedly photographic memory of who sat where at last year's auction dinner. We met the speaker last year in Aspen, she told a lobbyist from a clean energy pack. He was so grounded. No entourage, nothing. Just brilliance in a Patagonia fleece. That Patagonia fleece was mine, by the way. She borrowed it when her overpriced wool coat couldn't handle the actual cold. But sure, let's call it a bonding moment with a billionaire. I was still by the wall. A different waiter offered me a cocktail napkin and asked if I needed anything. Water's fine, I said. He brought it in a champagne flute, like I was someone. Poor kid probably thought I was one of the silent donors. Maybe a reclusive Scandinavian with a taste for anonymity. She never glanced my way. Not once. Not even a flicker of recognition or a polite smile to keep the illusion going. I didn't expect it. She'd gotten good at airbrushing me out of her life, especially in rooms like this. Rooms filled with people she desperately needed to impress. She touched arms when she laughed, tilted her head like she was deeply moved by banal stories. Repeated back first names in that calculated tone people use when they want to sound emotionally intimate with someone they just met. She didn't notice the ripples, but I did. Behind the AV station, one of the gala coordinators had frozen, phone in hand. She showed a blurry photo to a man wearing a headset. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "Backstage cam. Look who's sitting near the coat check." He squinted. "Is that who I think it is?" "Impossible," she whispered. "He disappeared after the Kessler buyout. Nobody's seen him since." They stared at the photo like it was a ghost. Meanwhile, my wife grinned at a board member and said, "Oh, and if you need help getting in touch with Lyle, I can probably drop a note. You know, from Aspen. Lyle, the keynote speaker. The man whose name was on every program, every screen, every whisper in the ballroom. The man whose entire company was standing on the shoulders of a stranger near the coat check. There's a strange satisfaction in watching someone lie with confidence about a memory they never had. It's like watching a blindfolded dancer waltz across a stage they don't know is crumbling underneath them. She leaned into another conversation, casually name-dropping a senator who hadn't attended, saying she'd personally nudged him to stay home this year. Conflict of optics. I nearly laughed. The senator's office had sent regrets weeks ago. She didn't even make the cut for his assistant's assistant to reply to. But it didn't matter. These people wanted to believe. They wanted their proximity to her to mean something. The way she wanted her proximity to them to mean everything. What none of them realized, yet, was that the real center of gravity in that ballroom wasn't spinning around her. It was sitting quietly, sipping water. I heard my name again. Faintly. Not from her. She'd never say it here. From someone else, backstage. "I thought he was dead," a voice said. "He's not," someone replied. "He just stopped playing." That was the thing. I hadn't died. I'd withdrawn. Deliberately. After Kessler, after the restructuring, after the headlines. I let the world forget me because it served me. No interviews. No comment. No press photos. I was a ghost with impeccable timing. And now, in this room full of desperate climbers and hollow titles, the myth they thought had vanished was quietly orbiting the very woman who'd spent 3 years trying to become someone by erasing who I used to be. She had no idea the myth was about to speak, or that it remembered everything. 10 years ago, I met him in a stairwell that reeked of burned coffee and failing dreams. His name was Lyle then, just Lyle. No title, no fanfare, just a sharp-tongued MIT dropout with $27 in his checking account and a whiteboard full of arrogant ideas. He'd just been laid off from Logie Mend, a firm that collapsed under its own bloat and incompetence. The last thing he said to his manager was, "You'll regret this when I own your suppliers." I liked his fire. I hated his pitch deck. But I stayed. Listened. Asked questions he couldn't answer, just to see if he'd get flustered. He didn't. He admitted what he didn't know, and then 3 days later emailed me answers. With citations. So I funded him. Not with a public check or some PR-riddled angel fund. Quietly. From an account that didn't trace back to my name. I didn't need another feather in my cap. I had too many already. What I wanted was simple. Build something that mattered, through someone who still had the energy to swing at giants. I shaped the company from shadows. Picked his first compliance officer. Rewrote his cap table to avoid cannibal investors. Got his patent filings through the maze of red tape by calling in favors from law firms I hadn't spoken to in years. In return, I asked for one thing. My name stays out. He agreed. Reluctantly, at first. Then, after the first $1 million quarter, gratefully. When the company went public, he wrote a thank you letter. Never sent it. Instead, he had it framed in his office. I know because I've seen it. Quietly. I've been to that office. We've shared coffee since. But we kept our meetings private. Always off book. He never forgot. And I never reminded him. Tonight, he was the keynote speaker, the man everyone called visionary, the poster child of bootstrap innovation. And I was background noise in his narrative. Not even a footnote. By design. But there's always a moment in every illusion where the curtain starts to flicker. And when it does, those closest to the spotlight get burned first. While he reviewed his notes backstage, I sat in the shadows of the ballroom, the chandeliers above me catching only the edges of my frame. No one looked twice. She, on the other hand, was making a spectacle of herself. Her phone was practically glued to her hand, snapping selfies with minor tech influencers, clinking glasses with fintech donors, tagging every foundation with keywords designed to be retweeted by PR bots. Her dress, a $1,000 statement piece, reflected flashbulbs as she leaned into every group shot, like she belonged at the center of it all, smiling with her mouth, not her eyes. She hadn't always been like this. When we first met, she hated these kinds of rooms. Too loud, too fake, too exhausting, she said. That was before her first taste of validation from the right circles. Before she realized admiration could be manufactured with the right dress, the right wine, the right curated sob story about a childhood that wasn't half as traumatic as she made it sound. Now, she was fluent in the language of elite insecurity. She knew how to perform poverty for the rich and success for the desperate. She played both roles like a seasoned actress. What she never realized is that she was the only one in the room who didn't know the script had already changed. Because the man she adored from afar, the man she claimed she'd met in Aspen, the man she told everyone she had a professional rapport with, wasn't just a star in her fantasy. He was someone I had made. He owed me more than his first round of funding. He owed me his survival. I'd saved his company from 2 hostile takeovers, hidden his first failed prototype, paid for the settlement when his CFO tried to sell IP to a Chinese firm. And through it all, I'd asked for nothing but distance. But tonight was different. Because I didn't come here to be thanked. I came here to end a performance. The trap wasn't theatrical. No dramatic twist. Just presence. Mine. In this room. At this time. In this suit. Next to her. She didn't even realize I was the tripwire. That every photo she'd taken that night had me in the blurry background. That every person whispering near the AV booth wasn't gossiping about the keynote, but about me. I watched as she leaned toward a hedge fund wife. Wine glass tilted just so. Lyle? Oh, he's brilliant. We hit it off immediately last year. He said I have the kind of mind that doesn't waste potential. I wondered how she'd spin that when she realized the kind of mind Lyle really admired was mine. He was halfway through rehearsing his opener. Something about resilience and innovation. When his eyes caught on a silhouette near the coat check. Just a man sitting still, arms crossed, eyes unmoving. The ballroom lighting caught the corner of a silver cufflink, and that was enough. Wait, Lyle said, the note cards trembling in his hand. That man, in the back. His handler, a wiry kid with too much hair gel and not enough sleep, followed the gaze. He saw me. He paled. You never told me he'd be here, the handler hissed. I didn't know, Lyle muttered. His voice wasn't panicked, it was reverent. Like seeing a ghost he wasn't sure he deserved to speak to. The cue cards slipped from his hand, scattered like leaves on the stage floor. Backstage, the production team froze mid-headset chatter. Is he all right? No idea. Did he forget the speech? No. He just saw someone. On the other side of the curtain, the band was playing the last notes of some polished, forgettable jazz. My wife laughed too loud at the wrong time again. Something she did when she wasn't sure whether to be charming or dominant. She was sitting at the head of table 4, surrounded by donors, campaign consultants, and a former surgeon general who looked like he was regretting RSVPing. Lyle stepped out from the side wing too early, his pacing off. The band stopped playing mid-note, like a power cord had been yanked. Whispers spread through the room. He walked up to the microphone, didn't smile, didn't wave. Just stared. Right at me. You could hear the tension crawling across the parquet floor like smoke. People fidgeted. One board member cleared her throat. Another checked his phone, then stopped when he realized nobody else was breathing. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Because I knew what this was. For years, Lyle had carried my presence like a secret, like a carved stone in his coat pocket. Never shown, but always there when it mattered. But secrets get heavier the higher you climb. And now, at the top, with 1,000 eyes on him, he couldn't carry it quietly anymore. He leaned into the mic. I was going to talk about the future tonight, he said, voice cracking slightly. About innovation, disruption, the things people expect you to say at events like these. A soft laugh from someone near the front died instantly in their throat when they realized he wasn't smiling. But I can't do that. Not yet. Because someone's here tonight. Someone I never thought I'd see again. The room shifted like a wave, everyone turning, necks craning toward the back. I stayed seated. Met his eyes. Didn't offer a nod. Not yet. I owe him more than I can explain. More than I could ever say in one speech. He changed my life. Built the foundation under my name. Made sure the world saw me. And not the fire that nearly burned everything down before it started. He exhaled. Took his time. I was a kid with a chip on my shoulder and a product no one believed in. He believed. He pushed. He protected. And he walked away from the credit. For a decade, I've been called visionary, genius, revolutionary. He looked directly at me now. I'm not. He swallowed. He is. Every head turned to follow his gaze. And there she was, my wife, frozen in place, hand still holding her wine glass midair like a broken statue. The smile she'd worn all evening melted into something slack-jawed and brittle. Her skin went pale in patches, color retreating from her cheeks like a tide pulling back. You could see the math happening behind her eyes. Driver. Clutch bag. Coat check. Water glass. That man. No. But yes. Whispers started like cracks in glass. Who is he? What's going on? Is that her husband? Didn't she say he was retired? I thought she said he just did consulting for nonprofits. She was shrinking in real time. All that posture. That posing. The illusion was shattering faster than she could rearrange it. Lal took one last breath. I'm rewriting my speech. Right now. Because anything else would be a lie. Silence. She finally blinked. And I stood up. One motion. No fanfare. Just rising to my full height. Slowly. Like a man returning from a decade-long nap. I met Lal's eyes. He nodded once. Deep and sharp. A gesture of debt. Of reverence. I didn't smile. Didn't need to. Because this wasn't triumph. This was exposure. And she'd spent 3 years building her name on the assumption that I would never speak. Never be seen. Never return to a room like this. But I didn't need to say a word. He already had. Lal gripped the podium like it might steady his voice. His gaze hadn't broken since the moment I stood up. The room had frozen around us. An ornate ballroom suspended in awkward silence, somewhere between awe and confusion. 1,000 curated faces trying to process a glitch in the social hierarchy. I need to pause before anything else, he said, his voice carrying the weight of something holy. Because there's a man in this room without whom none of this, none of what I've built, would have happened. He glanced back once at the event staff. The stage lights shifted slightly. Cameras zoomed in. This man doesn't do press. He doesn't take credit. You've never seen his name in TechCrunch or Forbes. But I can say this with absolute clarity. He built me. And I mean that in every possible way. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He stepped back from the mic. Just 2 paces. Turned fully. And pointed. Not to the VIP rows. Not to the board seats. To me. I'm sorry, he said again, quieter this time, almost stunned. Is that him? Gasps. Actual gasps. The collective breath of a ballroom pulled tight through pursed lips. And in that instant, every eye in the room turned. To her. She hadn't moved. The wine glass was still midair, fingertips frozen around the stem like a mannequin in mid-toast. Her lips parted slightly, as if a response had started to form, but never got clearance to leave her throat. She wasn't blinking. She was recalculating, rewriting the last 3 years in her head, replaying every moment she'd belittled me in front of friends, every time she had laughed too hard at a "he's just quiet" joke, every donor brunch where she had introduced me as a former consultant who enjoys reading by the lake. But now the narrative had changed. The donors at her table were whispering. Her assistant, who had always mirrored her behavior like a lapdog, was now glancing between us with wide, trembling eyes. Across the room, 2 men from a defense tech fund whispered furiously behind their hands. One of them holding up a phone with an image of me from over a decade ago, cropped from an old team photo, long buried, long forgotten by everyone but the ones who mattered. One woman leaned toward her. You said your husband was retired. She said nothing. I looked right at her. No emotion. Just the same stillness she always mistook for detachment. She had spent years confusing silence with insignificance. Now she was learning what silence really was. Patience. Lal cleared his throat. That man back there. His name won't appear on tonight's program. But I'll say it anyway. Because I owe him that. We all do. His name is Mason Rourke. And just like that, the room exhaled. Mason Rourke. Not driver. Not consultant. Not +1. The name cut through the noise like a scalpel. You could see it in their faces, sudden recognition. The ones who were really powerful in the room weren't shocked. No, they were embarrassed. Embarrassed they hadn't spotted it earlier. Embarrassed they'd made small talk with the wrong people. That they hadn't known he was here. My name wasn't on the guest list because I hadn't needed an invitation. She finally lowered the wine glass. Slowly, carefully, like she was defusing a bomb made of crystal and shame. One of her board donors, a brittle man with a handshake like overcooked asparagus, tilted his head. You married him? No answer. Why didn't you say anything? He asked, confused and a little accusatory. Jesus, you've been talking about Lyle for months. Still nothing. just the faint sound of ice settling in untouched glasses. Then I moved. Just a little. One small gesture. I stood straighter. Gave Lal a slow nod. Nothing performative. Nothing grand. And it was that moment, the nod, that shattered whatever illusion she'd been clinging to. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't following her script. I was the rewrite. Her gaze flickered like a dying light bulb. All those years of carefully manicured reputation, meticulously crafted social leverage, disintegrating in real time because the man she'd trained herself to see as dull and safe had just been unmasked as something far more dangerous. Respected, and worse than that, remembered. The moment Lyle stepped away from the microphone, the room erupted, not with applause, not at first, but with motion. A kind of organized chaos, the kind that only happens when social status is being reassigned in real time. The nobodies knew it. The somebodies felt it. They weren't heading toward him anymore. They were heading toward me. Executives, donors, analysts, even 2 politicians, one of whom had voted against a tech tax bill that my old firm had practically ghostwritten. Now they wanted to shake my hand like I'd risen from the dead. The chairwoman of the foundation, her foundation, offered me her card with both hands and a smile so tight it was practically an apology. "Mr. Rourke, if we'd known." "You didn't need to," I said. A journalist from the Atlantic quietly approached, notepad already open. "Would you be willing to go on record, just to clarify the nature of—" "No." Another leaned in from Bloomberg. Even background. I looked past her. She was trying to get to me. Her heels clicked too fast across the ballroom floor, betraying the panic she tried to mask with a smile. She was clutching her phone in one hand like it was some kind of social flotation device, glancing down at the screen between every step. Notifications were probably rolling in already. She broke through the crowd like a woman pushing against a current she didn't understand. "Mason," she said a little too loud. "Can we talk?" Lal turned as she approached. He didn't hide his disdain. I turned to her, slow, deliberate, letting her feel every second of distance she'd put between us over the last 3 years. Her voice dropped. "I didn't know. Why didn't you ever say anything?" And I answered her honestly. "You never asked." She blinked, tried to laugh, but nothing came out but breath. "That's not fair." "I mean, how could I have known?" "Exactly." She opened her mouth again, but closed it before any more damage could fall out. I turned back to Lyle. We spoke quietly, shook hands. The crowd moved with us. She stood alone, ignored now, eyes darting toward anyone who might offer her a thread to grab onto. None did. Later that night, she tried to call her father. No answer. He was likely already aware. He was always quicker to read social tides than she was. That's how his firm survived so many scandals. He bailed before the cameras arrived. She sat in the passenger seat of our car like a woman on a tightrope that had just snapped. No makeup retouching, no fake smile. Just silence and shifting pupils. At home, while I poured a glass of wine, not for her, her phone buzzed every 3 seconds. Emails, DMs, missed calls. Then came the text from her PR assistant. "Hey, quick question. Why didn't you tell me you were married to Mason Rourke? Are the photos real? We just got an interview request for you from MarketWatch. Should we accept?" Then one from her board's treasurer. "I'm getting calls. We need to clarify your position. Everyone's confused about why you never disclosed this connection." The irony was surgical. She'd spent years building a narrative around herself, one carefully engineered to sound independent, brilliant, and above the noise. And now, the one man she'd systematically excluded from that story was being credited as the only reason anyone ever listened to her in the first place. And people were listening now, to the wrong person. Her LinkedIn profile was suddenly under scrutiny. People she hadn't spoken to in years were reposting the gala photos, not of her, but of me standing while Al pointed, the caption always something like, "That moment you realize the guy sitting quietly in the back is the real architect." Or, "Mason Rourke." That's it. That's the post. She tried to tweet a damage control statement. Something vague and inspirational. "Behind every great person is a greater community." She deleted it after 4 minutes. Too late. Screenshots already existed. She turned to me as I stood in the kitchen. "I need to explain," she said, softer now. "To them. I need to clarify how you fit into the foundation's narrative." I sipped my wine. "You'll have to come up with a new story then," I said. "Because the one you built? It's no longer yours." And I walked past her. She didn't follow. Dinner was held in a private room tucked behind a restaurant that didn't advertise its entrance. The kind of place where no one asked your name and the waiter already knew not to offer the wine list. Just pour the right one. Lyle arrived before me. He always did. Nervous habit, probably. He'd already unbuttoned his collar and folded his suit jacket over the back of the chair, like he was trying to shed the weight of who he had to be outside that room. For the next hour, he didn't want to be a tech messiah or a keynote or the face of a billion-dollar brand. He just wanted to speak to the man who had once told him, bluntly, "Your code is good, but your gut is better. Trust it more than the data." I sat down. He didn't speak right away. He just slid a folder across the table. Inside, 3 notarized agreements, all dated back to Q4 of last year. Legal documents transferring advisory voting rights in his companies to me. Not honorary shares. Control. Why now? I asked, not opening it yet. Because I was waiting for the moment I could say it in person, he said, staring at his untouched glass. You saved my life, Mason. You did more than build the company. You built me. And I built a lot of this. Maybe too much of this. Pretending I didn't need to tell anyone that. I didn't respond with sentiment. That wasn't our language. Instead, I opened the folder, skimmed the first page, nodded once, and said, "It's clean." He exhaled. And in that breath, I watched the burden leave him. Not guilt. Guilt had lived in him too long to leave now. But obligation. The kind that doesn't go away until it's honored. While we ate, quietly, like men who didn't need to prove anything to each other, my phone buzzed once. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was. Across town, the ground under her stilettos was collapsing. Her foundation's executive board, rattled from the public fallout and stunned by the speed of the online backlash, had convened an emergency meeting. She wasn't invited. They cited internal review of conduct and narrative discrepancies. Translated, you lied about who you married, and now you're an exposure risk. 2 of the oldest board members, one she had strong-armed into early retirement last year, had returned for the vote. They came not for revenge, but for clarity. They'd once raised concerns about her spending, about the optics of her curated image. Back then, she'd silenced them with whispers of influence and proximity to power. Now, that power had shifted rooms. She tried calling in favors. No one answered. Tried texting allies. Messages read. No replies. The room where decisions were once hers had locked its door. And here I was, eating steak in silence while the most celebrated entrepreneur of the last decade poured me another glass of wine. He asked me one thing. Are you going back into the public eye? I smirked. Why would I? This is more fun. He nodded. Understood immediately. It wasn't about glory. It was about leverage. And leverage doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs weight. I signed the folder after dessert. Handed it back. No fanfare, he asked. Just send the updates to legal. Let the filings speak. As we parted ways, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. Firm, grateful. If you ever do decide to come back, I've got 3 board seats waiting. I nodded once, then turned toward the car. Back at the house, she was home. I saw the lights from the driveway. Her silhouette pacing in the upstairs hallway like a bird trapped in a glass cage. I didn't go in right away. I sat in the garage for a while, the engine ticking, the quiet pressing in. My phone buzzed again. I still didn't check it. Inside, a fire was already lit in the study. I hadn't started it. She had. A peace offering, maybe. Or just an old habit, the kind she clung to when her world was slipping through her fingers. I walked past her without a word. Sat down in the leather chair I'd had since before she knew my last name. Opened a book I'd already read 3 times. And let the silence speak for me. She stood in the doorway, phone in hand, waiting for me to look up. I didn't. She waited for the buzz she hoped would save her. I ignored it. The fire crackled. The room stayed still. And for the first time in years, I felt like the walls around me finally understood who they belonged to. She woke up to 4,712 unread notifications. 2 of her assistants had quit, one by email, one by Instagram story. Every headline had my name in it. Her face, frozen mid-expression, graced the front page of Tech Insider, Forbes Online, and, most painfully, Women Who Lead Weekly, the same publication that had once crowned her the next quiet giant of philanthropy. Now, their banner read, "Silent Architect Behind the Curtain. How Mason Rourke's Return Derailed a Carefully Crafted Lie." The article wasn't brutal, it was surgical. No slander. Just facts. Just screenshots. Just clips of her on panels saying things like, "When I met Lyle at Aspen, we immediately connected over shared values," spliced right beside video of Lyle's speech. I never met her before tonight. Even the captions didn't spare her. In every photo from the gala, she was there, frozen mid-sentence, one hand raised like she was explaining something deeply important, while I stood just behind her, half in frame, looking like what I was, the real story. She tried to post a response. A Twitter thread. Leadership is about learning. Last night's events taught me more than I expected. Deleted in 7 minutes. Too late. One sponsor, Riverton Logistics, a shipping giant with legacy ties to my former firm, publicly canceled their pledged $3 million donation to her foundation. We believe in transparency. We regret that our trust was misplaced. Another emailed the foundation directly, CCing every major board member. This isn't about who she's married to. It's about the lengths she went to hide it. The cracks weren't just forming, they were spreading. Fast. Her inner circle, once smug and untouchable, was fracturing. Her CFO submitted a sudden leave of absence. 2 junior directors filed internal memos asking whether her curated narrative violated ethics clauses in the foundation's donor agreements. That phrase, curated narrative, became the polite way to say lie. And then the worst part. The Post ran a weekend feature. Front page of the business section. The man who never asked for credit. How Mason Rourke changed a generation and stayed silent. The photo they used? A crop shot from the gala. While mid-speech, pointing. Me, in the background, standing calmly. And her, caught between the two of us. Mouth half open, like a glitch in the simulation. The woman who once corrected people for mispronouncing strategic philanthropy now looked like she couldn't remember her own name. She tried calling Lyle. He didn't answer. Tried emailing his chief of staff. Got an auto reply. Thank you for your message. Due to overwhelming demand following the gala, we are limiting new correspondence to previously established partners and verified contacts. If you are seeking Mason Rourke, we are unable to facilitate contact at this time. That one burned. She paced the hallway in a hoodie she never wore in public. No makeup, hair tied back, her laptop open, refreshing email threads that had gone cold. Sponsors ghosted. Journalists circled. One former board member even emailed me directly. Subject line: you were always the adult in the room. Should we talk? I didn't reply. She tried reaching out to her old PR firm. The one I told her not to hire years ago. The one known for style over substance. Their response: we suggest distancing from your current brand. Reinvention may be necessary. Translation: you're toxic. Rebuild or disappear. She stood in the kitchen that night, barefoot, holding a half-empty glass of wine and scrolling through her own search results like they might change if she just refreshed hard enough. I watched from the doorway. She saw me, didn't speak, just stared, somewhere between apology and resentment. She wanted me to fix it, wanted me to say, let me make some calls, let me spin this, wanted me to climb back into the shadows and pull her name back into the light. But I'd done enough. I wasn't going to lift her. She'd spent years pretending I was beneath her. Now the world knew better. And so did she. It started with an envelope, unmarked, delivered by hand to my attorney's office. Inside, copies of bank statements, vendor invoices, internal memos, all from her foundation, all detailing gala expenses that didn't quite add up. $78,000 to a boutique design firm that didn't exist. $41,000 in strategic consulting to a Shell LLC in her sister's name. $126,000 for transport logistics that went straight to a luxury car rental agency, the same one that delivered her Aston Martin 2 weeks before the gala. At the bottom of the packet, 2 signatures, both former board members. Men she'd pushed out 3 years ago when they started asking too many questions. Back then, she accused them of being obstructionists, said they didn't understand modern philanthropy. They understood plenty, enough to stay quiet while she was still on top. But now, with her credibility in pieces, with headlines slicing through her image like glass, they weren't just coming forward. They were ready to bury her. My attorney, Leonard, read the first 10 pages, closed the folder, and simply said, we'll let the IRS do the rest. I didn't ask for this. I didn't call in favors, or whisper to regulators, or plant the evidence. I didn't have to. She did it to herself. The gala had been the peak, her attempt to crown herself in public, to validate every curated lie, every exaggerated connection, every rebranded version of who she wasn't. And in doing so, she left a trail of signatures and siphoned funds wide enough for anyone who knew where to look. The 2 ex-board members handed over everything. Not to tabloids, not to blogs, to federal auditors. The foundation's Form 990s, supposed to disclose all significant expenses, showed numbers that looked clean. But matched against the bank data they'd retained before being ousted, there were gaps. Big ones. Leonard didn't even need to build a case. He just forwarded it. Within a week, a formal review was opened. By the time the IRS reached out for interviews, she'd already gone through 3 crisis managers. The first tried the deny everything approach. The second wanted to pin it on a rogue accountant. The third, an old Harvard law classmate of hers, told her bluntly, "You should have come clean the moment your husband stood up at that gala. He quit the same day." I said nothing. Not to her. Not to the press. Not even when her name started trending next to fraud and foundation mismanagement on Twitter. I went about my day, met with Lyle's team twice, signed off on a new advisory structure, read, cooked, walked by the lake. But she unraveled in slow motion. The board suspended her voting privileges. Her email was deactivated. Staff were instructed not to communicate with her without legal oversight. Her foundation, scrubbed her name from its homepage. The founder's message was replaced with a generic placeholder. Her carefully crafted bio gone. And when her assistant called asking if I could speak to someone on her behalf, someone from the oversight committee, I didn't even answer. I let it ring. Later, she cornered me in the hallway, desperate eyes, voice shaking. "They're saying I could be charged." I looked at her. Not angry, not vindictive, just honest. "You signed everything. You built it this way. You thought your image would protect you." She stepped back, like the truth was a slap. "I never meant." "Yes, you did." Her mouth opened, closed. No more words. She tried to walk away with dignity, but it caught on her like a snag in silk. The house that once felt like hers was now unfamiliar terrain. Every room held the echo of decisions she couldn't unmake. The gala had been her coronation. Now it was evidence. And I didn't lift a finger. I just let gravity do its work. 3 weeks later, I stepped onto a rooftop in San Francisco, invited, not dragged, not coerced, to a private founders event hosted by one of Lyle's portfolio companies. This time, there was no coat check to disappear into, no ballroom shadows to retreat beneath. My name was on the list. My name was the list. The moment I entered, the conversation shifted, not because I demanded it, but because the people who once ignored me had Googled me. They'd seen the gala footage, the interviews I didn't give, the companies I'd quietly shepherded through collapse and rebirth. And most importantly, they'd seen Lyle Point. He introduced me not as a guest, not as a colleague, but as his mentor. The word carried weight in that room. And this time, when the cameras clicked, I didn't move. I stood next to Lyle and 3 other founders I'd advised over the years. A silent circle of men whose fortunes began in shared insomnia, bitter coffee, and whiteboard arguments at 2 a.m. Now they wore suits that fit and owned companies that shaped industries. The photos spread fast. The headline: "The mentor behind the curtain steps forward, Rourke returns, and the industry listens." One photo in particular made the rounds. I'm standing calmly, hands folded, chin lifted, not smug, just present. Behind me, Lyle's midlaugh. To the left, the CEO of a healthcare AI firm leans in with visible admiration. And just over my shoulder, blurred by distance and poor cropping, stands a woman in a navy blazer. Alone, unsmiling, forgotten. The comments didn't need context. Is that the woman who lied about being married to him? Funny how close she stands when the cameras show up. Should have asked him who he was before calling him a driver. She didn't attend the event officially. She'd shown up with a minor donor, one of the few left who hadn't jumped ship. She wasn't on the list. Security let her in after a quiet phone call from someone who clearly hadn't read the room. She lingered at the edges all night, speaking to no one important, orbiting the people who no longer acknowledged her. That evening, as I returned to my hotel room, a message buzzed through. Her name on the screen. One line. "Please." I didn't know. No punctuation. Just desperation folded into a whisper of an excuse. I stared at it for a while. Then I replied, "You never wanted to." I didn't block her. Didn't ghost. Didn't send paragraphs or lectures. Just those 4 words. Because that's what all of this had been about. She didn't want to know who I really was. Not because she was blind, but because the illusion was more convenient. I was useful as long as I stayed silent, stayed still, stayed small. A man-shaped accessory. An invisible chauffeur who held her bag and nodded at the right times. The moment I stopped playing the role she'd assigned me, her world cracked. Not because I betrayed her, but because I refused to lie for her anymore. That was her real loss. Not reputation. Not money. Control. As I set my phone down that night, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched out like circuitry, lit windows blinking like neurons, alive and unaware. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I'd already won, and I didn't even raise my voice.